Hello guys, and welcome to another HTML and CSS project tutorial. Today we are going to be creating these shapes using only HTML and CSS. So this is actually going to be pretty responsive. Let me show you that. It's going to be pretty responsive. Alright, this is how it's going to look on mobile. And we are going to use a lot of CSS Flexbox, CSS Grid, and CSS Positioning, like the absolute position and all that, to achieve these shapes. Okay, so if you don't know any of these, this should actually be a good tutorial for you to understand how CSS Flexbox, CSS Grid, and CSS Positioning can be used to achieve aligning items and positioning items on your web page. And we have a lot to do, so let's get started. All right, so here in my main folder, I have my index.html file and I have my style.css file. We are going to start with the index. So I'm going to do exclamation tab with emit. And I'm going to link my style sheet, style.css. And there's the finished project. Okay, so we are going to keep this for reference and for our colors. We are going to be picking our colors from this page. We are first going to start with this. Okay, so for that, we have a rectangle. And then we have a big circle. So the big circle is actually going to be this blue one, and then we are going to have the lighter blue as the border of the big circle. Okay, and then we are going to have another circle which is going to be the yellow small circle. Okay, so for that we are going to have a div. I'm going to give this a class. This is going to be shape 1, and then we are going to have 3 spans. Okay, so span 3. All right, so the first one is going to be for our rectangle, the second is going to be our bigger circle, and then the third is going to be our smaller circle. All right, so let's head to the CSS and do that. First of all, I'm going to zero out the margin and padding of everything, and then set the box size into border box. And the body, I'm going to give it a width of 100 viewport width and a height of 100 viewport height. I'm going to display grid for the body, and I'm going to set the grid templates columns to repeat 5 1fr. Okay, so we are going to have 5 at the top, 5 in the middle, and then 5 at the bottom. Okay, we are going to have 15 shapes in all. All right, so that is this. Okay, and we are going to use a little bit of media query to make it responsive. So on large screens, there is going to be 5 on the top, 5 in the middle, and then 5 at the bottom. But on small screens like this size, is going to be 3 3 3 3 3. Okay, that is how we are going to structure it. So using our media query, I'm going to say at media screen, and let me set the width, the maximum width to, and for that I'm just going to change the grid template columns for the body. So the grid template columns for the body is going to change now to repeat 3 1frs. Okay, so that is going to do that. The maximum width to 700 pixels. I'm going to make this 1fr 1fr for small tablets. Okay, so 700 pixels is going to be around the size of a small tablet. And then I'm going to set another media query, set the maximum width to 500 pixels, and then now what I want to do is, this is the first shape. The second shape is going to have a div with a class of shape 2. You know what, take this off. So there are going to be 15 shapes. Okay, so I'm going to do with emit, I'm going to do shape, and then the number sign, which is going to increase, is going to give us shape 1, a div with a class of shape 1, shape 2, shape 3 to shape 15. Okay, so let me do tab, and then we achieve that. So these are our 15 shapes. Okay, so the first one, which is this, we had 3 spans. So let me head back to the style, and I'm going to give every direct div of the body, which are these. Okay, every direct div of the body, I'm going to have some styles for it. I'm going to position them relative and display flex on all of them, justify content to the center, and I'm going to align items to the center as well. I'm going to use preview on web server. So let me open that with preview on web server so that we see what's going on. Preview on web server doesn't seem to be working, so I'm going to use live server. Okay, that comes with VS Code. All right, so I'm going to give all of them a background so that you visualize what's going on. I'm going to give them a background of a dark color. So when they are there, I'm going to give a gap, okay, on the body. I'm going to give them a gap of 0.3 rem so that you just see everything clearly. All right, so these are the shapes. Okay, so for large screens, because of our media queries here, our large screens, we are going to have 5. Okay, and that is this. So it's going to be 555. For small screens on tablets, we are going to have 3. They are going to be 3, and then we go smaller, we are going to have 2 2 2, and then on mobile we are going to have each of them on their own lines. All right, so now let's move on to our first shape. Let's move on to our first shape. So I'm going to leave a comment here. So shape 1, that is the class we gave it. I'm going to give it a background. That is going to be the background. So we have that. And then the first span, okay, that is going to be, I'm going to do nth child, okay, and that is going to be the first one. Nth child is a pseudo class or a pseudo selector, okay. So that is what we are using to select our first span, which is this. Okay, we are using that to select the first one, and that is going to be the box. So let's give it a width, a height of 6 rem. I'm going to give it a background, and then I'm going to position it absolute. Okay, absolute, and it's going to be in the middle. It's going to be exactly in the middle because of this flex we had for our divs. Okay, because of this flex, and then justify and align items to center. So for the second span, so I'm going to grab this, the second span, that is going to be the bigger circle. So I'm going to give that a width, a height of 10 rem as well, and I'm going to set the border radius to 50%, okay, to make it a circle. Let's give it a background, and that is going to be this color. Okay, paste that in. So that is what we have, the border radius, make it a circle there, and then I'm going to give it a border, okay, to have that cut. Okay, I'm just going to give it a border of 2 rem solid, and then this color, and that will give it that cut illusion. It doesn't seem to be showing because we have to give this a z index, okay, so that it sits on top of the rectangle. So let's give that a z index of 1, and that does the magic. Okay, so we have the bigger circle. Let's move on to the third span, the small circle, which is the yellow circle. A width of 2 rem, a height of 2 rem as well. Let's give it a border radius of 50%, and a background is going to have a yellow background. The hex code is going to be, and then I'm going to give it an absolute position. Okay, let me first give it a z index so that it sits on top of everything. So a z index of 2, so that is where it is right now. I'm going to position it absolute, and that is going to have it right in the center. All right, so we are done with our first shape. All right, so our second shape is going to be this fork. So we are going to have a div, and we are going to have spans for the spikes. So these are going to be spans, each of these. So we are going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spans. And then this, we are going to use the pseudo element of the div. So we are going to have another div inside this, and then we are going to have spans, which are going to be the spikes, okay, and they are going to be 7. Second shape, a background, that is going to be the background, and then the direct div to have a width of 8 rem, a height of 10 rem. I'm going to give it a background. I'm going to give it a border radius, top left 0, top right 0, bottom right 4 rem, and then bottom left is going to be 4 rem. Okay, so we have that, and I'm going to display flex on that so that we can easily align our spikes for the fork. All right, so we are done with that. Let's move on to the spans. Okay, so the spans are going to have 100% width. We are going to have 7 rem for the height, then give them a background of this. I'm going to paste it here. So for every odd span, okay, for every odd span, I'm going to use the pseudo selector to select the odd ones. So nth child for the odd ones. For every odd one, I want to have the background set to this color so that you see the difference. I'm going to translate, okay. I'm going to use transform translate negative 0.5 rem. And I'm going to set the border radius to 1 rem. Then set the margin top to negative 3 rem. Now for the handle, okay, for the handle, I'm going to use the pseudo class for this. Okay, so let me grab that, copy, and then paste it here. And I'm going to grab the before. Okay, I'm going to set the content with 1 rem. Going to set the height to 6 rem. So that is our handle there. I'm going to position it absolute. Okay, and it's placed in the center now. And now we have our handle. And you know what? I'm going to give this a height of 8 rem. Okay, so that solves the problem. But it's not really in the center. Okay, so let me increase the width as well so that you see what I'm talking about. You see, this is not really in the center. Okay, so we are going to translate it again. So we are going to transform, or we are going to use the left. Okay, so from the left, I'm going to calculate 50% and then subtract 0.5 rem. Okay, which is half the width. All right, so now let's move on to our third shape, which is going to be this cow. Okay, so for that, we are going to have 2 divs. The first one is going to be this top part, which is going to have 3 spans, and then the second one is going to be this jaw. Okay, the jaw, which is going to have 3 spans for the teeth. Okay, so let's go to our HTML. I'm going to have a div, and then I'm going to have 3 spans. This is going to be the top part, and I'm just going to duplicate this for the bottom, okay, for the jaw part as well. So let's move back to our CSS. So for our CSS, I'm going to give this a background of 191919. It's going to be a dark color, and then I'm going to change the flex direction to column. That is all. Let's move on. The pseudo selector first child, that is going to be the top, okay, the top part, this part. I'm going to give that a width of 8 rem, a height of 7 rem, and then a background. This is going to be the background, and I'm going to display flex, all right, so that I can have the eyes and then the nose well aligned or centered in it. I'm going to align items to the center and then justify content to the center as well. Let's move on to the spans of the first div. The spans are going to have width of 2.5 rem. That is going to be the same for the height. We're going to have a border radius of 50% to make them a circle. And then I'm going to give them a background, which is going to be this same background, okay, the dark color. And then I'm going to set the margin top. I'm going to bring it down a little bit. Margin top is going to be 2.7 rem. I want to give a border radius to the main shape, which is the blue shape. Okay, so the skull is going to have a border radius of 4. That is for the top left, 4 rem. Top right is going to be 4 rem. Bottom right is going to be around 1 rem, and then bottom left is going to be 1 rem as well. All right, so back here I'm going to bring down the second span. Okay, I'm going to bring that down a little bit. So the second one is going to have a width of 1.4 rem, a height of 1.4 rem, and I'm going to position it absolute. All right, we have that, and I'm going to set the bottom, okay, to 0.6 rem. Okay, bring it down a little bit. Let me give this a gap. Okay, let me actually put that here so that we have some space between the eyes. So I'm going to give that a gap of 1 rem. All right, but now the problem is the nose. Okay, it's down here, but I want it at the bottom of this shape. I just have to give the parent, which is this, the parent div. I just have to give that a position of relative. Okay, and we have that. Now let's move on to the jaw. Okay, so the jaw is going to be last child. So let's change this to last, and I'm going to give that a width of 5 rem, a height of 2.5 rem, and it's going to have that blue background, which is this. Copy that, paste. Border radius of 0 top left, 0 top right, 1.4 rem, bottom right, 1.4 rem, bottom left. And then I'm going to display flex. Justify content is going to be center. I'm displaying flex because of the teeth, and I'm going to have a gap of 0.4 rem, the gap between the teeth. So let's move on to the actual teeth, which are the spans, okay, for the last child. That is going to have a background of the dark color. Let me grab that from here. Let's give it a width of 0.6 rem, a height of 1 rem, and a margin top. I'm going to give it a border radius of 0.4 rem. All right, now that we are done with our third shape, which is this cow, let's move on to our fourth shape, which is this eye. Okay, so for that we are going to have 3 spans inside our div. The first span is going to be the bigger circle. The second one is going to be this yellow one, and we are going to have the border to be this dark green. Okay, and then the last one, that's the third span, is going to be this middle circle. Okay, so this left and then right is going to be the before and after pseudo classes of the bigger circle. All right, so let's do that. Let's go to our HTML, and then our fourth shape, which is going to be the eye. We are just going to have 3 spans for that, and that is all. Okay, so let's move to our CSS. So our fourth shape, I'm going to give it a background. Let's move on to the first span. The first span, let's give that a width of 8 rem, a height of 8 rem as well. Let's give that a background of, and then we are going to give it a border radius. Let's make it a circle. I'm going to display flex, okay, because we are going to use the before and after to have that. Let me first make it a circle so that you see what I'm talking about. We're going to use the before and after to have these corners. Okay, so we are going to set that to flex. we are going to display flex and then align items to the center. I'm going to set the position to relative because we are going to have those pseudo classes positioned absolute. So for the before and afters, we are going to, so the before, I'm going to have the after as well. Okay, so the before and afters are going to, first let me set the contents. They are going to have a width of 4 rem, a height of 4 rem as well, and I'm going to have the same background. Okay, so let me just copy this, then paste that here, and I'm going to set the positions to absolute, and I'm going to transform, rotate it. Okay, I'm going to rotate them 45 degrees. All right, now I'm just going to shift them a little bit. So the before I'm going to have the left set to 0.8 rem, negative 0.8 rem, and the after is going to have the right set to negative, that is going to be the after. The right is going to be set to negative 0.8 rem. All right, so we are done with the first span. Let's move on to the second one. So I'm going to copy this, change this to the second span. The second span is going to have a width of 7 rem. That's going to be the same for the height. I'm going to set the background to yellow, and I'm going to position that absolute so that it's in the middle, and I'm going to make it a circle. So border radius is going to be 50%, and border, okay, I'm going to have that dark green, okay, for the border. So that is going to be 0.8 rem, sorry, 0.8 rem solid. And let me grab that dark green color from this. Okay, so we have that. Now let's move on to the third span, which is going to be the dot in the middle. That is going to have a width, come on man, a width of 2 rem, a height of 2 rem as well. I'm going to set the background to be the dark color again. So let me just, I'm going to position that absolute as well, and the border radius is going to be 50%. And this position absolute is bringing them right in the center because of the flex we gave this. Where is it? Because of these settings, okay, because of the display flex, and then the justify content and aligns items to the center. Because of that, that is why it's bringing everything right into the center with absolute positioning. Okay, so we are done with our fourth shape. Right, now let's move on to our fifth one, which is going to be this staircase. All right, so for this fifth shape, I'm going to have a div, which is going to be the blue wall, and then I'm going to have 4 spans for the staircase. Okay, so let's do that in the HTML. Just going to have a div, and then I'm going to have 4 spans. All right, and that is all for our HTML. I'm going to give it a background, so this is it. Now let's move on to the div with the blue background. So div, I'm going to have the background set to blue, border radius 4 rem, 4 rem 00. I'm going to display flex, okay, because that is going to help us easily align our stairs. So the flex direction is going to be column. I'm going to give them a gap of 0.2 rem, and I'm going to position this relative. Okay, so let's move on to our stairs. They are all going to have a background of the 191919, this background. They are going to have a height of 1 rem, and they are all going to be positioned absolute. Okay, from the bottom they are going to be 0 from the right as well. All right, and they are all going to have different width. Okay, so if I should give all of them a width of 2 rem, you will see them here. Okay, they are there, right? But I want them to have different width, so that is what we are going to do. So let me select the nth child one, which is the first span. I'm going to give that a width of 2.4. Come on, man. And margin bottom, okay, of 3.3 rem. All right. Going to duplicate this a few times. So our second one is going to have a width of 3.8 rem, and this is going to be 2.2. Okay, the margin bottom is going to be 2.2. This is the second one, and we have the second one. The third one is going to be 5.4, and this is going to be 1.1. Third, we have the third one. Let's go on to the last one, and that is just going to have a width of 6.6. Let me see, that is the third one, the fourth one, sorry. All right, so we have that. All right, so for our bell, we are just going to have 3 spans in our HTML. So let's do that. That's our seat shape. So we are just going to have 3 spans. Back in our CSS, let me comment this. That's going to be our bell. Let me give it a background of 3-1. I'm going to change the flex direction to column for this, okay? For the main div, I'm going to set the flex direction to column. And then let's target our first span. Nth child, that is going to be the first one. I'm going to give that a width of 3 rem, a height of 3 rem as well. I'm going to give that a background of yellow, border radius, and then z index. I'm going to set that to 1. Let's move on to the second span, and that is going to have a width of 8 rem, a height of 8 rem as well. Let's give that a background, and then border radius is going to be, all right, let me actually set this to 2 rem, 2 rem, 1 rem, 1 rem. All right, that does it. Let me actually remove this z index and put it on this one, and I'm going to push this down a little bit with margin bottom. Going to set that to a negative 1.2 rem. All right, so that is that. Let's move on to the third span. Let's give that a width of 3 rem, a height of 3 rem, a background. I'm going to set the border radius. Actually, you know what, this is going under the bell, the actual bell anyway, so it should be 0, 0. I'm going to set the margin top to negative 0.8 rem. Perfect. So we have our bell. Okay, that is our seat shape. Okay, let's move on to our seventh one, which is this shape. Let's move on to that. All right, so for the seventh shape, which is this Halloween pumpkin thing here, we are going to have a div, which is going to be the main shape, and then we are going to have 5 spans. Okay, so there is going to be 1 span, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. All right, so let's do that in the HTML. So you're going to have a div, and then you're going to have 5 spans. Okay, all right, so let's head back to the style sheet. I'm going to give that a background. Okay, let me go to the inner div. So that is going to have a width of 10 rem. It's going to be the same for the height. I'm going to have a background color. Let me give it a border radius of 5 rem for the top left, 5 rem for the top right, and then 3 rem for the bottom left and right. Okay, I'm going to display grid. Going to set the grid templates columns to 1 FR, one fraction, and then I'm going to justify content to the center. I'm going to align items. Okay, so we have that. Now let's head to the spans. Okay, so let's start the spans. I'm first going to target the first and then the second span. You know what? Let me first give every span. I'm going to first give every span a background. Okay, they are going to have the same background. I don't want to be repeating that. So the first and second spans are going to have a width of 5 rem. It's going to be the same for the height. And then the border radius is going to be 50%. We have those. I'm going to set the margin top to negative 2.4 rem to push it to the top a little bit. Let me set the overflow for this to hidden. Okay, overflow. Next, I'm going to go to the third and then the fourth spans. They are going to have 3 rem width and height, and border radius is going to be 50% as well. You know what? I'm going to change this to justify items. Okay, justify items to center. Next, the last one, which is going to be the mouth, that is going to be the fifth span. So nth child 5. I'm going to set that it's going to have a width of 2.5 rem, a height of 0.5 rem, border radius of 0.2 rem, and then I'm going to position that absolute, and it's going to be 1 rem from the bottom. All right, so we have that, and that is all for our 7th shape. For the elephants, I'm going to have 3 divs. Okay, so the ears is going to be a div, the face itself is going to be a div, and then the right ear is also going to be a div. Okay, so let's go to our HTML. The 8th is going to have 3 divs. Okay, so div times 3, and then for the face we are going to have the eyes. Okay, so those are going to be 2 spans. All right, and that is all for our HTML. Let's go to the CSS. I'm going to move on to the first. Let me actually move on to the face. Okay, I'm going to start the face first. So div and child 2, that is going to be the face. Okay, there are 3 divs. The ear, the left ear is going to be this is actually the right ear, right? That is going to be the first one, the first div. We have the face, which is the second div. Then we are going to have the left ear to be the third div. So let's start the face first. I'm going to give that a width of 8 rem, a height of 8 rem as well, and a background color. Border radius is going to be 50%. I'm going to set the z index to be 2. Okay, and then I'm going to position this relative. We are going to be positioning some stuff absolute in it, so this should be relative. Going to display flex, then justify content to the center. Going to align items to the center as well. Let me give a gap of 1 rem. Okay, and that is going to be for the eyes. Now I'm going to target the eyes, so those are the spans. So they are going to have a width of 2 rem. That is going to be the same for the height. Border radius is going to be 50%. I want them to be circle. And then background, I'm going to give them a background. All right, so the eyes are there. Let me just change the color so that you see they are actually there. Okay, so they are there. Now I'm going to, let me remove this. Now I'm going to give it a border. Okay, I'm going to give it a border 0.5 rem solid, and the eye color is actually going to be this color. Okay, let me remove the red. Okay, so we have the eyes. Okay, we have the eyes. I'm going to have the eyes half closed. Okay, so what I'm going to do is set the before. I'm going to get the before pseudo element of the face, which is the second div. I'm going to get the before pseudo elements, and then the content, going to give it a width of 80%, height of 1.2 rem. Background is going to be this dark green, and then I'm going to position it absolute, and that is it. I'm going to push it to the top a little bit, so from the top I want it to be 35%. All right, so we have that. 3.5 rem, a height of 3.5 rem as well. I'm going to position this absolute, and then from the bottom they are going to be 3 rem. Okay, negative 3 rem from the bottom. A border radius of 50%. I'm going to give it a border of 0.8 rem, solid and then transparent. Okay, the border top color is going to be white. The border left color is going to be white as well. All right, so we have this. I'm going to rotate it, so transform, rotate 45 degrees. Perfect. So we have that. Now let's move on to the ears. Okay, let's move on to the ears. So for the ears, the ears is going to be the first and then the third div. So the first one, I'm going to duplicate this, and then the third one, I'm going to position this relative. I'm going to give it a width of 3 rem and a height of 8 rem. Okay, background, I'm going to set that to the dark green. Okay, so those are the ears. I'm going to give them a border radius of 50%. Now we are going to target the before pseudo elements of the first and then the third divs. Okay, so before for the first div and then before for the third div as well. And those are going to have contents, of course. Oh, you know what? Let me take this out. So for the before pseudo elements, height is going to be 100%, and I'm going to give them a dark green background, which is going to be 0b2. Border radius is going to be 50%. Position is going to be absolute, and they are going to be 0 from the right. So I have that. I want this one. Okay, I want this to be from the left, 0 from the left. So I'm going to grab, that is going to be the third div. I'm going to grab that, and then from the left I want it to be 0. Now the last thing I want to do is the nose. Okay, the nose, this, I'm going to set the width, height, and I'm going to set the background to the dark green. Okay, which is, so that is the nose. There's it. I'm going to position it absolute, and from the bottom is going to be 0, and then z index is going to be 3. Border radius, and that is all for our elephant. Okay, now let's move on to the next one, which is this gallery shape. All right, our next shape is going to be pretty simple, which is this gallery. We are going to have only one span. Okay, that is going to be for the circle, and then these mountains are going to be the before and after pseudo element of the circle or of the span. Okay, so we are going to go to our HTML and then just have a span there. That is all we need. Let's head to our CSS. Okay, so the main div is going to have a background. This is the ninth one. So the main div is going to have a background color. Now let's move on to the span. Okay, I'm going to give it a width of 12 rem. It's going to be the same for the height, and I'm going to give it a background of the sand color background. This background border radius is going to be 50% to make it a cycle. Position is going to be relative. Now we are going to have the mountains. Okay, so we are going to have the before and afters. Okay, so this is going to be the before, then this is going to be the after of the span. Okay, those are going to be the mountains. So I'm just going to copy this and then paste it in. This is going to be the before. I'm going to give it a width of 6 rem. Same for the height, 6 rem as well. I'm going to give it a background. That is the background. I'm going to position it absolute. From the bottom is going to be -3 rem. Okay, and I'm going to rotate it. So transform rotate is going to be 45 degrees. All right, so that is what we have. That is our before. I'm just going to copy this and duplicate it for the after. I'm going to have the width set to 9 rem. Same for the height. It's going to be from the bottom -3 rem as well, and then from the right is going to be -1 rem. Okay, and that is our after. Or is it? Okay, so that is our after. All right, so for now what I'm going to do is just set the overflow for this circle to be hidden, and that is all. All right, that is our ninth shape. Now let's move on to the next one, which is going to be this B. Okay, now for the B's, I'm going to have two dips. The first is going to have two spans for the wings. So these are going to be spans, one here, one there. And then the second div is going to have 4 spans, okay, which are going to be these black lines, okay. And then the last one is going to be the eye, okay. So 4 spans here and then 2 spans there. So let's go to the HTML, and then we are going to have two divs. The first is going to have 2 spans, okay, and then the next is going to have 4 spans, and this is all we need for our HTML. Let's head to the CSS. Going to have a background, and I'm going to change the flex direction, okay, to column. Both divs are going to have a width of 10 rem and a height of 5 rem, okay, and they are all going to be displayed flex. Perfect. Now let's move on to the first div. Okay, let's start the first div, which is the rings. Okay, so for that, let me actually style the spans directly. So for that, I'm going to give the spans a white background. They are going to have a width of 50%, a height of 100%. All right, and then the border radius is going to be 50%, 50%, 50%, and then 0. I'm going to change the first one, the border radius for the first one. So first child, border radius, I'm just going to copy this, paste, and then change this value. Okay, so it is going to be 0. All right, so we have the wings. Now let's move on to the last child, okay, which is the body of the bee itself. All right, so that is going to have a background. The body of the bee is going to have a border radius of 3 rem. We've displayed flex for both of them, so we don't need to display flex here again. So I'm just going to give it a gap of 0.4 rem. That is between the black lines. These black lines, they're going to have this gap, and then I'm going to justify content to start. All right, now I'm going to move on to the spans. The spans are going to have a background of black and a height of 100%. They are going to have a width of 1.8 rem. So those are the black lines. I'm going to set the overflow here to hidden. Perfect. Now let's style the first one. That is going to be the eye of the bee. So that is the last child. Let's give it a width of 1.3 rem, 1.3 rem as well. Border radius 50%. I'm going to align self. Sorry, line self to start. I'm going to give it some margin. So margin top is going to be 0.8 rem. For 1.3 for the right, 0 for the bottom, and 0.5 for the left. Okay, so that is all for our B. Okay, that is our theme shape. That is all for our B. Now let's move on to the next shape, which is going to be this mark or this cap right here. For the mark or the cap, we are going to have three divs. The first one is going to be the left handle. The third one or the last one is going to be this handle, and then the middle one or the second one is going to be the cap itself. Okay, and then that is going to have three spans for these details. Okay, so let's head to the HTML, and then I'm going to have three divs. The first is going to have nothing. The third is going to have nothing as well, but the second is going to have three spans. Okay, and that is all for our HTML. Let's head to the CSS. I'm going to copy this comment. All right, so I'm going to give that a background. Now let's style the middle or the cap itself, the body itself. Okay, the cap body itself. So shape 11 and then end child. That is going to be the second div. We are going to give it a background of FFF1C 1C. Width is going to be 6 rem. Height is going to be 4 rem. Okay, so we have that. Border radius 0, 0, 2 rem, 2 rem. Display flex so that we can have those details positioned well or aligned well with Flexbox. I'm going to set the flex direction. Flex direction is going to be column, and then I'm going to align items to flex start. Okay, I'm going to justify content to start, and then I'm going to give it a padding of 0, 0.8 rem. Perfect. Now let's move on to the details, and those are going to be the spans in the second div. I'm going to give it a background. Width is going to be 1.5, 1.6 rem. I'm going to give it a height of 0.25 rem, and border radius of 5 pixels. Okay, so we have our shapes there. Now let's position them well. So the first one, so end child, the first one, I'm going to give it a margin of 0.4 rem for the top and bottom, and 0 left and right. Okay, so that is the first one. Let me grab this. The third one is going to have a width of 1.2 rem, a height of 1.2 rem as well, and a border radius of 50%. Okay, that is going to be a circle. I'm going to align self to end so that it pushes it to the right, and then margin top is going to be 0.7 rem. Okay, I'm going to give it a z index of 1. Those are going to be the handles. I'm going to give them a width of 3.5 rem, a height of 2.2 rem, border. I'm going to give them a border of 5 pixels solid, and then FF this color. So those are the handles. Going to push them to the top a little bit with negative 1.8 rem. Let me give them a border radius. Okay, so they are going to have different border radius or radii. So the first one is going to have a border radius of 1 rem, 1. Okay, and then I'm going to shift it to the right a little bit with margin right, negative 1 rem. Okay, let me do same for the third one. The right handle is going to have 0 here. Alright, so we have our cap. Okay, so our mark is done. Let's move on to the next shape, which is going to be the house. Okay, let's move on to the house. So for the house, we are going to have two spans. The first is going to be the roof, and then the second is going to be the main block. Okay, and the yellow things, or the door, and then this yellow thing here is going to be the before, the pseudo elements. Okay, so let's head to our HTML. This is going to be the 12 shape. We're going to have two spans, and that is all. Let's head back to our CSS, grab these comments, and then comments here. All right, so there's it. That is the background. I'm going to change the flex direction to column here as well. Okay, now let's move on to the first span, which is the roof. First child. Okay, I'm going to give that a width of 10 rem, a height of 10 rem as well. Border left is going to be 7 rem, solid transparent. Border right is going to be the same thing, 7 rem, solid transparent. Then we are going to have border, which is going to be 5 rem, solid, and then the dark blue color, border left. All right, so we have our roof. Okay, now let's head on to the yellow thing here. Okay, let's style that. So that is going to be the before. Let's style the before pseudo class or pseudo elements. We're going to give it a width of 5 rem, a height of 6 pixels. Background is going to be EEB850. Okay, and I'm going to position this absolute 0 from the bottom. All right, and I'm going to push it to the left a little bit, so calc 50%, and then I'm going to subtract half the width, which is 2.5 rem. So we have it exactly in the middle. Okay, let's move on to the block itself. So that is going to be the last child. I'm going to give that a width of 10 rem, a height of 8 rem. I'm going to set the background, so we have it, and then I'm going to position this as relative. What is wrong? What is wrong? We have a problem right here. So you know what? This should be the last child. Okay, and then this is going to be from the top. All right. Perfect. So we have that. Now let's style our door. Okay, so that is going to be the last child as well, and that is going to be the after pseudo element. Okay, so after, I'm going to set the weight to 3 rem, height is going to be 4 rem. We're going to have that yellow background. We're going to position that absolute. Okay, so there is our door, and then from the bottom is going to be 0. Okay, it's going to be 0 from the bottom. Now let's push it to the middle. So from the left, I'm going to calculate it. So 50% and then minus the width, which is 1 point, minus half the width, which is 1.5 rem. Okay, so we have our house. We have our house. All right, so for the guitar, we are going to have 4 divs. We are going to have this circle as well. We are going to have this bar as a div, and then the last one is going to be this. Okay, so we are going to have 4 divs. Okay, and the first div is going to have a span in it. The second is going to have a span as well. The third is not going to have a span, but the fourth is going to have 2 spans. Okay, so let's head to our HTML. This is going to be our 13th shape. So we're going to have 4 divs. The first is going to have a span. The second is going to have a span as well. The third is not going to have a span, but the fourth is going to have 2 spans. Okay, and that is all for our HTML. Let's head to the CSS, and every div is going to have a background of dark yellow or dark green. I don't really know. Okay, they're all going to have this color. We're going to give it a width of 6 rem, a height of 6 rem as well, and a border radius of 50%. Okay, let's move on to the span in it. There's a span in it, so let's style that. The span is going to have a width of 6 pixels, a height of 2 rem, a background of dark green. Then I'm going to position it absolute. Okay, I'm going to give it a top 50% and then minus half the height, and then we are going to give it a length of 2 rem. Okay, and a border radius of 4 pixels. All right, the second div is going to have a width of border radius is going to be 50%, margin left 5 rem, negative 2.5 rem. We're going to set the z index to 1. Okay, I'm going to set the z index to 1. Then I'm going to display grid. Okay, and place items to the center. Perfect. Now let's style the span in that. So the span in that is going to have a width of 2.2 rem, same for the height, and a background of the dark green. Going to have a border radius 50%, so that is it. And I'm going to have a border of 4 pixels solid, and then the yellow color, which is F2. Next we are going to style the third div, so nth child 3, and that is going to have a width of 6 rem, a height of 1 rem, a background of the dark green, and a margin left of 0 point. I'm going to have it pushed. So this is, let me show you quickly with what is wrong. Okay, So that's what we have, but I'm going to push it beneath this. Okay, so I'm going to set the margin left to a negative 0.4 rem. Okay, now we have that. Now let's move on to the fourth div. So nth child 4, and that is going to have a width. That is going to have a width of 2.2 rem, a height of 1.6 rem, border radius of 0.5 rem. I'm going to give it a margin left of 0.4 rem. Okay, we have that negative 0.4 rem. Okay, so that is what we have. I'm going to display flex. Okay, because I'm going to position, or I'm going to align the spans in it. So display flex, and I'm going to change the flex direction to column, and then the row gap is going to be, I'm going to set the row gap to 0.3 rem. Okay, let me give it a padding of 0.4 rem. Perfect. Now let's move on to the spans in it, which are going to have a width of 100%, height of 0.4 rem, and then a background of a dark green color. Okay, so that is all for our guitar. Let me see. I think I have a problem with this. The span. You know what? This should be positioned relative. Okay. Yeah, perfect. This should be positioned relative. Okay, so that this can be positioned absolute in it. Okay, so that is that. Let's move on to the next shape. For this shape, I'm just going to have a div, which is going to be this yellow thing, and then I'm going to have 3 spans in it. Okay, which are going to be these shapes. Okay, so we are going to go to our HTML, then I'm going to have a div with 3 spans. All right, and that is all we need. Let's head back to our CSS. Background is going to be dark. That is going to be the background. There is it. There is it. Shape button div. I'm going to give that width border radius is going to be 4 rem, bottom right 1 rem, bottom left. I'm going to position this relative because we are going to position our spans absolute in it. I'm going to start the first span. Okay, so nth child, that's going to be the first one. I'm going to give it a width of 2 rem, height of 2 rem, border radius is going to be 50%. Let me give it a background, and then it's going to be positioned absolute. Okay, from the top is going to be 50%, and then I'm going to subtract half the height. I'm going to subtract half the height. Okay, which is 1 rem. It's going to be 50% as well, and then half the width. Okay, so that puts it right in the middle. Now let's go on to the next div, the next span, sorry. That is going to be the second one. Give it a width 8 rem, height 8 rem as well, background. I'm going to position this absolute, and then from the bottom is going to be negative 3 rem, and then from the left is going to be -3 rem as well. Let me give it a border radius of 50%. Perfect. Let's move on to the next span. Width is going to be 10 rem. Same for the height. Background. I'm going to position this absolute, and then this is going to be -4.5 rem from the bottom, and then from the right -5 rem. Okay, let me set the border radius to 50%. Let me just set the overflow for this to hidden. Okay, and we have our shape. We have our 14th shape. Okay, our last shape is only going to have 2 spans, so we are going to have this first span, and then there is going to be the second span. Okay, this line and this line are going to be pseudo elements. All right, so let's head to our HTML and then have our 2 spans. Let's get back to our CSS. Leave a comment here with a background of dark green, which is this. I'm going to send the overflow to hidden. Give it a width of 5 rem, a height of 6 rem, and then I'm going to give it a border of 1 rem solid, and then the yellow color to be 5. Let me give it a position of absolute, and it's going to be pushed out of view a little bit with -1 rem. Okay, so it's going to start from the side and then be pushed here. Okay, so we have that. Now let's move on to the next span, where is going to be the last child. The last child is going to have a width of 9 rem, 8 rem. Okay, I'm going to give it a border 1 rem solid, and then DDA, and I'm going to position this absolute. It's going to be pushed as well to the top. Now I'm going to have the lines. Okay, so I'm going to use the pseudo elements. So I'm going to use the before here. Going to display block. I'm going to give it a width of 1 rem. Height is going to be 17 rem. Then I'm going to give it a background of DDA and 3D. Let me give it a margin left of 1 rem. Perfect. Now the width is going to be 9 rem. Come on. The width is going to be 9 rem. Height is going to be 1 rem. I'm going to give it a background of 9. Let me position it absolute so that you see it. Okay, so that is it. And then I'm going to, it's going to be -3 rem from the bottom. Okay, so it's going to be pushed down like this, and then from the left it's going to be -1 rem. All right, so we have our final shape done, and this is going to be pretty responsive. So let's check the responsiveness. It is going to be responsive. Let me try and fix. Is this a bug? You know what? Let me fix the bug. Okay, let me fix the responsiveness. So let's see. Let me give it let me give it a main height. Okay, main height of 20 rem. That's going to be the main height. Okay, so now we don't have that problem. Okay, so now everything looks great. All right, and that is all for this tutorial. I have more amazing tutorials coming up, and I have even more on my channel, so you can check them out. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.